So
like what? Let's get to art.
there are a couple of actual movie files that I couldn't include because they didn't fit. And in that version of HyperCard, there wasn't a way to play these movie files. So I actually have a music video of Time Machine, and I have, and that was, it wasn't something we could include because there wasn't a way, to get it inside HyperCard at that point. You would have had to launch QuickTime. It probably would have, in my recollection, is it also probably didn't fit on the diskettes. But I do have a couple of those things.
What other things did you want to put on there that you had to cut?
There were the things that I was most disturbed by, from an artistic perspective, was the loss of quality of a lot of things. Going from, because I shot a lot of photography for this, so and that's, that may be one of the art forms that's not necessarily explicitly represented, but in those days you had, I was shooting film photography, and then I would have to print it at 8.5 by 11,
right.
And then I would have to Xerox it, xerographically reproduce it, please respect our trademarks, in order to get it through the platen of the ImageWriter 2 so I could thunderscan it. So I was going out and shooting stuff in 35mm photography that I then ended up throwing away most of the information in order to get it onto a card.
Did you keep your photographs?
Yes,
Good.
yes. And I will show a couple of those examples in the talk tonight, because that was the thing where I felt the pinch of the medium of the 1-bit graphics most intensely. Because now with 24-bit scanning, it looks as good to most people as a photograph.
Right.
It really isn't, but it looks as good.
It's not as lossy.
No one is going to mistake that for a photograph, and that's both a strength and a weakness. It's a strength because I got away with a crap ton of stuff that if you were trying to do it at full res, you couldn't afford to. Some like the whole Hyper Earth thing is a bit of a hand wave, because I couldn't afford to build an entire Earth model and rotate it and zoom all the way in. So you build it in a very simple model in 1-bit graphics, and you can get away with it. So there's a benefit to that. But the flip side was, for things that I really wanted to have look good, it was very lossy.
Okay, so go ahead. So one other question. So there's almost a coffin feel to the box.
Yeah.
So the presaging of the potential of him disappearing, being dead.
Yes.
Or just not, there's a death. There's a death, whether he's physically dead or
never existed.
Or never existed at all.
Yeah.
There was some sort of death of a character in this thing, and this kind of carried that idea.
Yes.
Okay, so let me see if I have any questions for my own stuff here. Oh, the literary illusions were amazing. I was trying to write them all down as you were talking. The obvious one is, of course, Burroughs for the burrower, but you had even William Carlos Williams, So Much Depends. Lady of the Tiger. You had Wallace Stevens, I heard. Wallace Stevens.
Asides on the oboe. Yes.
Yep, and then you had also, you even alluded to Stuart Northrop, which I thought was fun. But there were literary allusions throughout.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about that a little bit? You're so widely read in seemingly modernist and contemporary work. So you want to...
Well, I really would have to say there are two main literary parents for me for the fiction, and one of them is Thomas Pynchon, and Gravity's Rainbow, which is a novel which contains within it music hall numbers, popular songs, equations. There are no visible artworks, but there is a tremendous reference to the language of art and film and music and theater, and that was a mental model for me, that the novel did not have to proceed in a linear fashion using only narrative. So if the work had a father, it would be Pynchon, and the work's mother is Ursula Le Guin.
Oh, wow. Well, I didn't get that one, so tell me about, I mean, it makes perfect sense for Pynchon. Tell me about Le Guin.
I read a book, Ursula Le Guin is, I think, probably the most underrated American writer, living American writer. I think that she is absolutely brilliant, not just as a science fiction writer, but as a writer, as someone whose vision penetrates to the essence of humanity and who manages to put that into a work.
Light of Heaven is brilliant.
It's brilliant stuff. It's brilliant. And she wrote a book in I think it's 1985 called Always Coming Home. And it is an anthropology text. It is a series of stories about a tribe called the Kesh who live in a future Northern California. And part of it is a little chunk of it's a linear narrative that's told to an anthropologist, but is a linear chunk of text about a person who lives in that culture. And then the rest of it is artifacts, is stories that have been collected, poetry that has been collected, folk tales, there's a dictionary, there's a series of maps, and then there's slipcased in the original edition is a cassette tape of the poetry and music of the Kesh. And that is, for me, that was